All right, well, it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the PRME Chapter Talks today. My name is Louisa Murphy, and I am joining you from Copenhagen. I am a coordinator of fundraising and partnerships at the Principles for Responsible Management Education, or PRIME. If you're not familiar with PRIME, I'm going to actually include a link in the chat so you can read up on PRIME. Now, the PRIME Chapter Talks, what are they? Well, the PRIME Chapter Talks are a series to provide a cross-chapter space for thought-provoking knowledge exchange on sustainability challenges and solutions for academia and business. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the hosts of today's Chapter Talks. We have joining us Dr. Lisa Frolick, Chair of PRIME Chapter DACH, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Also President of CBS International Business School. And we also have Dr. Belinda Gibbons, Chair of PRIME Chapter Australia and New Zealand and Senior Lecturer, Sydney Business School. So they will introduce the topic of today's Chapter Talks and today's panelists to you. The floor is yours, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very, very kind introduction. Also a very warm welcome from my side. It was not so easy to find a joint date, let's say, because Australia and Europe is not so easy. But anyhow, we managed this, and we are really happy that we have so many participants. We will directly ask you a question where you all come from, so that we have a better idea. So I'm talking from Cologne, yeah, Cologne, Germany. But I already saw that we have some other participants from some of my colleagues from Germany already joining. So our chosen topic today is indeed really one of the major challenges we have to face at the moment in terms of environmental dangers. To give you only one number, more than 3/4 of the greenhouse gas emission associated with any industry sector around the world come from their supply chain. So I think this makes it very clear that this is a very important topic to talk about. Due to the time restriction, because I'm only giving a brief introduction like Belinda, then later on in terms of CO2 problems we have to tackle, I would like to draw your attention to 3 different aspects. First of all, the supply chain as a whole. For example, food supply chains, they are in danger because of global warming, and related to this, water shortage. Climate change combined with extensive cultivation of cotton in Uzbekistan, for example, has led to the almost complete drying up of the Aral Sea. And now attempts are being made through new methods of cultivation for apples, because apple production was a very traditional one in former times, but was replaced by the cultivation of cotton. And now they are stretching foils over the trees so the water cannot evaporate and then is used again for irrigation. So this is a very good example and very innovative example for how we can improve a global food supply chain based on the problems they have to face because of climate change. Another issue is that climate change related problems like this lead to, and this is maybe even the more important topic when it comes to economics, leads to global economic cost of reduced productivity. And this is estimated at more than $2 trillion by 2030. So COVID-19 already gives us a first idea of our future if we do not stop climate change, because of COVID-19 is, or let's say COVID-19, what we have to face right now is a consequence of unsustainably managed supply chains. So a very good example and a very sad example at the same time. For the problems we have to face right now. So my first message for today is that decarbonization of supply chains is of great importance towards climate change mitigation. Now I would like to change the perspective a little bit. I would like to give you a further example, but now addressing concrete steps of the sustainable supply chain. Due to the fact that my major field of research is sustainable procurement, I would like to stick with this functional area. So besides manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, storage, and finally consumption, sustainable purchasing plays a major role in implementing decarbonization strategies. So due to the fact that we have two amazing guest speakers, I have to keep it short, but I would like to give you one concrete example how purchasing can support this decarbonization of a global supply chain. And I would like to refer to a brand new, highly innovative field, which is called circular purchasing. So you all know circular economy, and now we are transferring this concept to the different functional area. And in case of purchasing, we try to focus on procurement items designed for durability, repairability, and recycling. And then can, in the end of their life cycle, the products can, in the end of their life cycle, be broken down into components, materials, or even raw materials, which can then be used again in the production chain. So far, the definition. I would now like to give you an example from the chemical industry, which I really liked a lot when I heard about this the first time, because or let's say it gives you a very good idea what is possible in the downward supply chain in terms of dealing with climate change problems. So coming back to the chemical industry, so 90% of 1 ton of crude oil is burned for energy production. So we all know about this. Of the remaining 10%, around 6 to 7% are used by the chemical industry as a raw material, for example, plastic production. We all know about the threats coming from this. And the chemical industry is working on new technologies to recycle already existing carbon products in a way that they become crude oil again. So the chemical industry's vision for the future is to use only crude oil that has already been processed. So this is an innovative example of circular procurement. And from a technical point of view, this is already feasible. But unfortunately not from an economic point of view. So we have to bring together those, we all know about the triple bottom line. So we always have to think about also the economic point of view. So we have to find a way that it's also worth going for this way. But in the long run, this is the vision of the chemical industry and will definitely be a very important step towards climate change mitigation. The final topic I would like to introduce is sustainable supplier selection and relationship management, because this high level of innovation, this is only possible if we embrace also suppliers. We call this low carbon purchasing, for example, and a very important lever for achieving this is the sustainable supplier relationship management. What can we do? So what companies are already doing, they are trying to assess the sustainability level of suppliers in a different way, using different criteria, which are, for example, in our case, related to decarbonization mitigation strategy. But what is, for me, even more important is that we somehow take our suppliers, and this is what I'm always focusing on, that companies have to take their suppliers with them on their sustainability journey. So it's all about collaboration. It's all about education. It's so important because most of the supplier companies, they are small and medium-sized companies. They simply don't have the knowledge. They don't have the experience to deal with those climate change problems we have to face. So we need the support of the suppliers, but it's also our responsibility in the developed countries that we somehow help our suppliers to deal with this. And this finally, or let's say my second message before I hand over to Christos and briefly introduce him, is that in this respect, when we talk about purchasing, because purchasing is still one of the functional area where most of the companies do not really pay attention to, but they have a very, very strong influence on any kind of environmental threats and dangers we have to deal with. So there is still a lot of work waiting for us fighting climate change. And from my point of view, embracing all stakeholders is key issue in this respect. And we have to, and this is now the link to our first guest lecture or guest speech, let's say, we have to include technology. Especially with the downward supply chain, we highly depend on any kind of information we can get to really implement appropriate decarbonization strategies within our downward supply chains. So the usage of sustainability software based on whatever, artificial intelligence, data mining, or any kind of other advanced technology enhances the visibility of greenhouse gas emission. And this could be, or this knowledge can be used across the whole supply chain, and analytical models to manage the impact of climate change are desperately needed. So we need to collect data and we need to share data. And why this is so important and what can be done, this is now the task of Christos to explain this a little bit further to you. I'm really proud to introduce Christos to you because he's one of our master students. He has a really impressive CV already, founded a lot of companies, startups in the field of data analytics. He already started, even though he's still doing his master, he already started with his PhD research in England. And yeah, he will also start as one of our lecturers in data science. I think in 2 weeks, our semester is starting again, unfortunately online, but yeah, we all know about the problems we have to face right now. So Christos, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our president from Cologne Business School. Thank you very much, everyone, that you having me here today. And yeah, I'm more glad to present something related with new technologies and how innovation can lead this fight against climate change. And maybe if you allow me, I can share my screen. So I hope that everyone, you can see it. Thank you very much. And I can start with a picture here that I would like, let's say, to explain some things in order to give a more, let's say, detailed introduction on what new technologies can do. So for me, the future of green supply chain is socially connected with the digitalization. And we can say that through difficult periods, like also Ms. Freulich mentioned before, such as the COVID-19, we can say that the disruptive innovation is rapidly growing. And I can say that when we speak about disruptive innovation, we mean technologies and applications such as cloud platforms, mobile sensors, blockchains, big data analytics, machine learning, deep learning, and Internet of Things. But let's see what this application has to do with our future for climate change. So how can I apply this application? And we can say that in order to support and to establish a reliable, green, and more precisely eco-friendly transportation system and supply of goods, the smart application could be the connected tools that will help us in the fight against climate change. With the uses of artificial intelligence and big data, and by applying machine learning and deep learning algorithms, we can have more sustainable and effective supply chains business. Another point that you can see is that an intelligent system has the ability to hold records of details of the data, and therefore the system can aware, for example, the condition of shipping, the vehicle types, the cost, and via historical and current data, an AI system can display information to the logistic companies so to save money or reduce pollution. Again, how we can do this? How an AI system can work for us? So in reality, an AI system and artificial intelligence systems works in real time and can track the shipping environment to display some, let's say, fuel efficient strategies and can lead, let's say, to know better the fluctuations, to find better planning routes to ship stocks, and which can lead to a considerable reduction in, for example, petroleum or diesel. Another point is that electric cars or even driverless AI bots that can be used in the disposal of companies, and via their smart systems can, let's say, pull information from GPS in real time by collecting the data and by analyzing the details and the shipments. And again, like Dr. Froelich said before, those information could be shared with another companies, with another supply chains, businesses, or firms that can lead, let's say, to better results. So to know more specific, maybe what will be the correct way to use or to follow in order to reduce the pollution. And this is exactly what we see here in this, let's say, picture. Those things that I mentioned before has to do with this picture that we can see that we have established an Internet of Things sensors that could lead in real-time analytics that could be shared in a cloud platform. And then we can create, let's say, a system with the structure of AI system could be a data mining, data analysis, the machine learning and deep learning algorithms that we can use. That depends from the complexity of the system that we will use, and the prediction. And through this, I would like to present, this is a simple example that from the data that we can gain, this is a data from the last 60 years, for example, for every month, that will be daily, that will be hourly, or even per second. So we can see that with the right features, we can extract some results, and we can see the average carbon dioxide emissions levels in the atmosphere per year. And we can see, unfortunately, that the percentage is growing rapidly year by year. So another part of the system is that can show to us a seasonal fluctuation of the carbon dioxide emission levels. And through this, we can say that it depends the system again that we use, machine learning or deep learning algorithms that can be established in our system. We can take some predictions, and those predictions can lead us to some conclusions of how we can use our own, let's say, strategies in this global supply chain, and in order to fighting the climate change. So the results you can see here, for example, that at the next 20 years, that the carbon dioxide emission will cross about 450 parts per million, which is a very big number. And to this, we can say that, yes, we can know how we can lead our new strategies. So maybe we should use electric cars, maybe we should use electric trucks. Like I mentioned before, some driverless boats that can be used with AI system, or even drones that already I know in United States some big companies use already. And in my point of view, that will be great. So again, in order to fight the climate change. That was for me. Thank you very much. And I will be here for the discussion, or whatever, let's say, question you will have related with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christoph.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Belinda. You're directly taking over. Perfect.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, thank you so much, Christoph. That was extremely interesting, and obviously data is very important in our fight moving forward. Yeah, welcome everyone. Good evening, morning, afternoon. I firstly would just like to acknowledge that the beautiful land on which I'm joining you from in Australia is Aboriginal land. And as we share our knowledges and hopes for the future, may we always remember the knowledge is held forever within the traditional custodianship of our beautiful country. And I pay respect to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal friends who are joining us on this call or who may be listening in the future. So while we have had a year that has taken its toll on our society and our economy, the most significant and far-reaching global challenge lies ahead in the not too distant future, we fear. The climate crisis is accelerating at an unprecedented rate, and we are not ready for it. 2020 was one of the hottest years in record, and in Australia, we see the effects of climate change firsthand. We've heard from Lisa and Christos on some of the effects of climate and how that is affecting our supply chains, and why we need to measure that, and why we need to measure in order to reduce and know what we're doing in regards to our emissions, but how and who is responsible. As with the pandemic, we see that in times of crisis, we depend on scientists and the ingenuity and vision of innovators, alongside the resources and boldness of companies to solve these really big problems. So decarbonising the entire economy by 2050 requires some extreme transformative changes. We see companies making big commitments to net zero, but we need more, and we need innovation. We need companies and people thinking really differently when it comes to electrification, affordable and long-term energy storage, regenerative agriculture, and we need committed funders who are patient enough to see these investments pay off. If we are not already too late, we have to work together to ensure that we reduce these greenhouse gas emissions, and thinking differently and creatively is a massive part of this. I'm extremely proud to introduce Natalie Chapman to you, and we're extremely lucky to have her with us. Natalie is the founder of gemaker, and I am just really so excited for you to listen to what Natalie is seeing in the innovation space. And I'm going to hand that over to you now, Nat, so you have lots of time to share with us your stories. Thank you. Just do you want to just take it off mute, Nat? I know you think someone would innovate for that, hey?
Well, that's why we made these cups, right? And we just hold them up every time someone does what I just did. So, yeah. And I'm going to turn off everybody else's computer. So I actually look at that funny looking thing called the camera and not at everybody's faces throughout my presentation. Can you hear me okay too?
Yes, perfectly.
Awesome. Now all I need is my computer. Ah, good. Right. Hang on. I seem to be missing something. Right. Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak. I'd like to acknowledge country. I'm speaking to you from Sydney in New South Wales, sunny Warrenora on the right-hand side there, which is in the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders who may be attending today. I also recognise the various traditional lands on which those of you listening are located and acknowledge their custodians too. So early last year, Australia experienced one of its worst bushfire seasons, with 17 million hectares of land incinerated, and that's an area that's roughly twice the size of Austria, which is located on the right-hand side of Australia. So we watched helplessly throughout our Christmas. We didn't really have Christmas holidays, even though we were off for 6 weeks, because what we were doing was we were watching the news broadcasts, we were watching our phone apps that had where all the fires were located, and we could just see that fires were coming closer and closer to more homes. They were damaging more of our bush. They were killing billions of animals, and they were displacing others. Thousands of homes were destroyed. The air was not safe to breathe for weeks, and it was catastrophic. It was traumatizing for the nation to experience. And in all of this, Greta Thunberg's words rang really clearly in my head at that time. And what she'd said is, act as if your house is on fire, because frankly it is. And Australians really could identify with that at that particular time. For over 20 years, scientists have been warning all of us that climate change would increase the risk of extreme bushfires in Australia. And last year really proved that point, where the bushfires came off really heavy droughts, and the heat and the extra high fuels were basically all considered to be consequences of climate change, and we were seeing the brunt of it. If you look around the side of my slides there, you can see what the fires did to much of our land. Basically just black sticks left, and it looked like a moonscape. There were no animals, there were no birds. And frankly, if you looked at the top 5 issues that were really affecting Australians at that point, they were saying environment. Climate change was really coming up as number 1. People were really thinking that, you know, there is urgency to this, we need to do something about it. And while debate has raged around the country about whether climate change is real still, and I'm a scientist, right? So that type of debate is really grating after 20 years of proof that, you know, environment was there. Not only was it on this survey, but it was a case of when you were in a cafe and you were talking to friends and family, you're talking to anybody, they were all concerned about climate change and they wanted to do something about it. Healthcare and cost of living rated next, and the economy further down, and unemployment really wasn't an issue because we didn't have that many issues with unemployment at that stage. Now, emergencies stimulate innovation. And Einstein has said that in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity, which honestly, you're not thinking at the particular time when you're in the middle of the emergency. But the Australian bushfire disasters was a big catalyst for innovation. We were using satellites to help our fire crews work out where to go, how to save houses, where to deploy their resources. We were using drones to help find our wildlife and also feed our wildlife. We've never really had to put lots of food in drones and use them to actually find wildlife out in desolate areas and provide them with sustenance to get them through this sort of devastation. And not only that, but we're also using drones to help with dropping gum tree seeds to help revive the forest habitat. And portable solar generators were going out and being given to people in remote communities because bushfires took out all of the power infrastructure as well. New emergency, new crisis, new things to think about, and the top 5 issues facing Australia suddenly changed around about March, April, because COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we could see it in Australia. We were, pretty carefree about it to start with because it wasn't really affecting us straight off the bat. It started going through China, started going through Italy. I had a holiday booked for September and was going through France. I'm thinking 2 or 3 months, they'll be over, it'll be okay, we'll still be traveling. Well, that didn't happen. That definitely didn't happen, and I can't even get outside of New South Wales. So healthcare became a big concern, the biggest concern straight up with COVID and what was happening. And then, well, the environment really just nobody particularly cared because, frankly, the economy was falling apart, jobs were falling apart, people were concerned about health, and so there were lots of other things that people were thinking about, and climate change really wasn't making a rating on all of that. Now, interestingly enough, as we mentioned, crisis really paves the way for innovation. Well, all of those times that, we thought that board meetings couldn't possibly be done via remote, that we couldn't possibly have conferences remote, we couldn't possibly run government by remote, we couldn't possibly do so many businesses by remote. Now, I run a company that actually is fully remote and has been for the whole 9 years that we've been operating. So I know that's actually rubbish, but it was people's mindset. And as soon as we started closing borders, as soon as we started making people stay at home, then all of a sudden, all of these things were possible. And COVID actually accelerated innovation and things that you could do with innovation. So now, we put a ring around Australia and effectively no one can get in and no one can get out, if you haven't already heard that one. We don't go on boats anymore. We don't go on planes. And, heck, I have a car. I pretty much hardly drive it these days. So what we managed to do was actually lower our carbon emissions, the lowest they've been in 20 years, which, it can be done. We can actually reduce our emissions by changing our behaviour. And, COVID has accelerated so much of our thinking and our innovation and technology, and even the fact that we're all on Zoom today, really. So, Zoom has become the new travel, unfortunately, because I really would like to travel, but anyway. Now, Australia's top 5 exports are iron ore, coal, natural gas. Education services are international students coming in for our higher education, and also personal travel services are tourism and a lot of international tourism. So COVID pretty much wiped out our overseas international students coming into the country. It wiped out our international tourists coming into the country. And so our 3 main earners are effectively iron ore, coal, and natural gas, where 2 of those are obviously fossil fuels, not exactly helpful to reducing climate carbon emissions and helping our environment. And so when you've got those as your 2 big earners to prop up the rest of, I guess, if you don't have tourism, you don't have your education services, unemployment starts to go pretty quickly. And so governments need money, and they need to start putting programs together to have people have jobs. So to rebuild the economy, a lot of reports have been done over the years, and these are some of the recent reports into, so we've got University of Melbourne, Risky Business, and Beyond Zero Emissions have all done reports. And so when you're thinking about the massive amounts of stimulus packages that governments are putting out at the moment, that's actually, if you're strategic about it, it's a very good opportunity to then be investing in the future, investing in decarbonising the future, investing in, say, Beyond Zero Emissions, are saying put investment into a 1.8 million jobs plan within 5 years is what you could grow in the reduction of emissions. Now, boards used to think of climate change as a tick box exercise that they needed to do and discuss. And if you happen to be in an agricultural type of company, then maybe you took a bit more notice of it because you were concerned about drought or where the water was going and that sort of thing. But now we're actually finding corporates are leading the way in a lot of Australia, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, particularly if you take Mike Cannon-Brookes from Atlassian, who has actually is a very strong advocate for solar power in the country, as well as being an innovator himself with Atlassian as a business. He also has a venture capital firm that invests in technologies, renewables, those that reduce carbon emissions. And so you've got a variety of companies that are all out there doing things because, a lot of these companies are being run by people who are having another thought about the fact that we need a planet and we need a planet for our children. We can't just keep doing what we're doing. And so a lot of the companies are also aiming for net zero carbon emissions, including Rio Tinto, who've put $1 billion investment towards doing that. When it comes to climate innovation, Australia has quite a strong track record in solar. It's held the world record for the highest efficiency in silicon solar cells for the last 40 years. They've also created the world's only solar roof tiles that can provide both electricity and heated water. And 1 in 5 households in Australia now have rooftop solar PV. Now, wherever you've got innovation, you also have problems. And one of the problems with putting renewables out on as many houses as possible is that our power infrastructure wasn't really designed to support solar. It was designed to support fossil fuel. Turn on your gas or your coal power and run it as base level power, not have variable power of when the sun shines or when the wind blows. And so a lot of innovation is actually happening in the country at the moment to be able to have the power utilised by our power infrastructure. Now, I wanted to make sure that when I was talking about innovation, that I wasn't just talking about one particular sector. And so I've tried to mix a few different sectors and a bit of technology in different areas as well, because Australia has a massive wealth of innovation and technology and really smart researchers developing all sorts of things, as well as innovative businesses. Now, I've put a Tesla car in here, which is an electric car. And, you know, we want to see electric transport, because electric transport means we don't need to burn diesel, we don't need to burn petrol. And so when we get into an electric car, we think, you know, this is good, no emissions, and that we're doing something good for the planet. Now, also, if we're trying to do something good for the planet, we then have to think about what's in those materials in the car in the first place. And I don't know how many of you do or don't know, but in a Tesla, you have rare earths in an electric motor and you have lithium in the battery. Australia happens to have the world's largest supply of lithium, and we also happen to have an awful lot of rare earths in the country. So we don't just need to do iron ore, coal and gas. We can actually be in the renewable area all the way from the beginning of the supply chain. So electric cars are expected to rise rapidly. And also, it's not just cars. There's electric buses, electric trains, electric drones. There's all sorts of electric vehicles that are going to be in use. And these electric vehicles use something called permanent magnets in their motors. One very innovative Australian company is called Australian Strategic Materials. And since we were doing a bit of climate change, bit of supply chain, I thought what I would do is actually put one of the supply chains on here for you, because ASM is in a lot of this supply chain. And so supply chain for taking a rare earth all the way through to an electric vehicle is, you obviously have to dig it up first. You then concentrate it and you turn it into an oxide. You then turn the oxide into a metal. The metals then go to make permanent magnets. Permanent magnets are what you need in an electric motor. And you need an electric motor to put it into an electric vehicle of any description. Now, traditionally at the moment in Australia, we dig up the ore and we might concentrate it, and we may make it into an oxide in Australia, or we just send it overseas as a concentrate, which is low value, it's not high knowledge jobs, it's, you know, the dig it up, send it overseas mentality. For ASM, they are going to take it all the way through to making metal themselves and partnering up with others to make magnets. And so they're going to be in the full spectrum. And when you think innovation, mining doesn't necessarily come top of mind. But in this particular case, the method that they've developed to actually take the rare earth out of the rock and turn it into the oxide is very innovative and is less harmful to the environment than what you may, if you Google rare earths and look it up, then the processes of old were quite harmful to the environment. This is much nicer. And also they're going to do metallization, and that metallization process, turning oxide to metal, will actually use 70% less energy than what is currently used by the current process, and it will also use less harmful chemicals than the current process does. So I'd also like to, I've got a very pretty picture of cows here. And the reason I have a pretty picture of cows is because we have a lot of agriculture. We have a lot of beef in Australia, if you haven't already, if you're not already aware of that. And cows actually contribute quite a lot to carbon emissions. And so our research agency, our National research agency called the CSIRO, has been doing research for quite a long time into supplements for cattle from seaweed. And basically it reduces their carbon emissions by 80%. And when you think about the fact that agriculture in our country is actually contributes towards 16% of our carbon emissions, having something that reduces the carbon emissions by 80% is important. So I thought that was a good example to make sure I brought to you. This one I like as well, which is called AMSL Aero. And basically what you can see there is the beginnings of an autonomous drone, and we have care flight. And care flight are about doctors going out and getting patients from remote areas and regions. And so they'll be able to do it using less carbon emissions because the drone is powered by electric motors. You won't need a pilot in there because it'll be autonomously piloted. So you'll just have the doctor and the patient in there. And also 30% of the components in there are made by Carbon Fibre, a company in Australia that is also very innovative. So you've got lots of partners working together to be able to make these type of new technologies and use them for new applications. For me, like I said, the bushfires were quite concerning for all of us, and I wanted to act in January of the year, just like everybody else wanted to do something and felt quite powerless as to what to do. I set up a website called Climate Action Australia, and I put information on there that was very easy to find, and it was more coming from a business and a technology viewpoint. It has very easy reports and information to understand for more of a business person. It gives you information on how what's going on, how to do something about it at a personal level, how to do something about it from a business level. And it also covers innovation in the climate change, reducing carbon emissions space. So there's examples of companies from Australia and what they're doing in the carbon emissions space, so different technologies they've come up with, and also international. And finally, I showed you the moonscape before, and the moonscape really scared me. I went out to the Blue Mountains that used to be, the area that I went to used to be quite green and lush. And when I saw it, it looked like that earlier picture of the moonscape. And it was really frightening because I thought, are we ever going to see bush back in this area again when so much of our bush had gone? And I was pleased to see many months later, after much, much rain in the country, that growth was coming back. And so the leaves, are not on the ends of the tree. They're actually all the way up the tree, which was really inspiring. It was fantastic. And so we've had two big crises in the last year, and collaboration and innovation have really come to the forefront. And I think that change is what we need. And the crisis allows us to change faster. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nat. Are you okay?
I've just talked myself stupid all day.
You're right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, for that really insightful presentation. Yeah, and it's just so lovely. Yeah, just to see what innovations are coming out, especially from our country, and just how we are thinking, very differently at this time. I might just get Lisa, I'll pass over to you, but Nat, would you mind just putting that website up just in the chat, and yeah, and just your email maybe, so if people want to contact you or just have a look at some of your stuff there. Over to you, Lisa.
So yeah, my question is now: do we have some questions from the audience, or do we have 10 more minutes for discussion? So for me it was really interesting because we did not talk before this, yeah. So, and it's really interesting that you exactly addressed the topics I was briefly addressing in my introduction. So obviously we have all around the world the same issues when it comes to climate change, yeah. So with maybe different consequences, that's for sure, yeah. Yeah, with the food supply chain, especially, this is one of the major topics we have to deal with right now. So we also have a very interesting cooperation with GIZ. This is a German development company in terms of a company. It's from the government, so that we help to improve global agricultural supply chains, and we are doing a research with Africa right now. So that's quite interesting. But Natalie, one question, because you talked about this feeding cows with seaweed. Yeah? So we are right now talking about the problem that one of the reasons why we have COVID-19 right now is that we make animals very vulnerable because we feed them with stuff they would not eat, basically, yeah. So if we come back to traditional agricultural techniques, let's say, and giving them the food they are used to, most of the issues we wouldn't have, yeah. So what is your what is the research outcome based on this seaweed experiment, let's say, feeding cows?
In terms of the science, I could direct you to the CSIRO in. Can you hear me or?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So I can direct you to CSIRO in terms of what they've found. I wouldn't be able to answer it. It's a very good point that you make, though, because, yeah, I mean, who wants to set off the next pandemic because we're feeding cows seaweed? I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
I think,
it's vegetarian, and then the cow thing's not an issue, but there are other issues. So
yeah. That's really true. Yeah. So because this is what I right now always try to discuss with companies and also with the students. Yeah, that due to the fact how we are setting up global supply chains, this is one of the major reasons why we have all those issues. Yeah. So because deforestation and destroying all the wetlands. Yeah. So because we are entering areas of the world we basically should not go to. Yeah, there is a good reason for it because of those viruses and everything, and we are simply not taking care about this anymore. And we are trying to, for palm oil production and all the other stuff. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to deal with this. Is there any question from the audience? I'm just having. Tobias, hi.
Hello.
So simply turn on your mic. I think that's okay, or?
Okay, so I think you can hear me?
Yes, Viv.
Good. Okay, so first of all, thanks for the presentation and for the great examples. But my concern with regard to innovation, when we look at it from a business perspective, is that yes, we need innovation, we need innovators, we need entrepreneurs, and that will change a lot. But as you said, we are also really in a situation like a burning fire, and we have to react quickly. So my question is, what's your opinion on as a role of like government and even of stricter regulations to force certain innovations? This is not really always business school thinking, I know, but my impression is that with leaving it to the companies and the innovations alone, we will not get quick enough to where we need to get. So what should governments and framework setters do to get the innovation quickly into existence?
COVID accelerated innovation. So we were told that you couldn't have meetings with your doctor via video conference, right? So our people in the region, like in the middle of the country, have to fly over to visit a doctor. And now all of a sudden we have, telemeetings and video conference meetings with doctors. And what stopped that was government policy in terms of doing something called a Medicare rebate. So when you go to the doctor, you don't have to pay, you have a card. that, as an Australian citizen. So government were acting in many ways during COVID to get things to happen faster. So they wanted ventilators made very, very quickly. And so they had, they were actually funding some groups on purpose to be coming up with new versions of ventilators, and then having the TGA, our health regulatory body, being able to streamline activities. Not that it wouldn't be that it would be harmful, but just to get rid of some of the normal bureaucracy and really long red tape type of stuff. So government during an emergency can act really quickly, right? We saw that happen with so many things in Australia, and innovations are just through and happening, just like using Zoom for you didn't used to use that for government meetings. Now that you can't move between states in this country, pretty much still at the moment. So when you've got all of your ministers all live around the country and they have to meet, well, all of a sudden it's okay to meet, virtually. So government does have to be involved, but more to be able to make things happen quicker in a regulatory sense without harm.
Maybe I can add.
It can do it. Yeah. It can do it for climate change. It's just been like a dry run for climate change. Effectively, it's just people think climate change is too far off. When we burn such a large amount of the country, and I know that it didn't seem like a lot compared to the country, but see, most of our country lives around the edges of it, not through the whole middle of it. So there's whole sections that have no people. It's all the areas that burned were around the coast where we all live, that kind of got everyone.
Maybe I can also come up with an example, because we have right now in Germany and also in Europe, we have the discussion going on with the Supply Chain Act. And most of the companies are not really willing to support this. And we had a really huge talks to journalists last week, and it was really interesting because there is definitely no knowledge about what can be done and what kind of changes we need in a supply chain. And I think this is one of the major problems. I'm perfectly with Natalie in terms of that the government should give us the appropriate framework, let's say, so that we can act in a kind of standardized way, because this is what I try to explain. A supply chain law is nothing which forces company to do something specific, which is very expensive or whatever. It's on the other side a kind of competitive advantage, because we all have the same, let's say, starting point. Yeah, it's standardization. That's the point behind it. Yeah? So if we don't have those rules, then everybody starts at a different point, and then we have a complete mess when it comes to competition. Yeah, and when you see it from this perspective, then companies start thinking about, okay, this is something good if we have this framework. Yeah? So how to behave in terms of tackle the different problems in the supply chain. But as I try to end my speech in the beginning, what you also addressed, Natalie, it's all about collaboration and communication. Yeah, we need to talk to each other. We need to make sure that everybody understands the position of every stakeholder. And we have to find a way how to bring all these different points of view together, and find a kind of global and joint solution. I think that's very important. And unfortunately, we are quite far away from this. Yeah, because also I like those kind of talks like we had here, because honestly, I'm pretty sure that most of the Europeans have no idea what's going on in Australia and the other way around. Yeah. So we need this understanding of the different situations around the world, and we need a kind of global understanding of climate change, of CSR, of ecological problems, whatever. Yeah. So I think that's one of our major tasks, also from the research point of view. Yeah, that we have to provide some solutions here too.
Yeah. Actually, Australia. Some of the funding that the government's given recently is to the manufacturing sector, and it's to help them skill up in the manufacturing sector, but also to onshore, because during COVID there were so many things that we couldn't get access to, that Australia's had to try and manufacture will do more manufacturing than it used to, but it also wants to do smart manufacturing, not, you know, sitting there turning a wheel or doing a little bit of this, that, and the other. It's actually using automation and robotics. And when you put those in, you can actually compete globally instead of it being done manually, and therefore you're competing on a labour hourly rate. You're competing on higher knowledge type jobs and using automation for, you know, the lower level, low skilled.
Yeah, so I would say the time is over. I would like to say thank you to, first of all, Natalie and Christos. Very, very, very good presentation, very interesting insights into completely different topics. But I hope that we all learned how important innovation is. And yeah, also thanks to Belinda that we made it finally. It was not so easy in the beginning, but I think it was a really, really good idea to bring two chapters together and work on a common topic, let's say, where everybody can bring in his expertise. So, and also thank you very much to our audience. We already have the link, so the whole speech was recorded, so you can have a closer look later on. Yeah, it was a great starting into a new prime year, let's say, and I hope that we will see each other sooner or later in person again. Yeah, so I also was 5 years ago, I was in a conference in Australia. I hope I can come back to sooner or later, but I think we will have to wait another year for this before traveling starts again. And yeah, I think it will not start the same level like we had it before, but at least a little bit of traveling. So once or twice a year would be fine also. Thank you very much, Belinda. I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you again to our lovely speakers. And I hope that the recorded conversation is played in our classrooms. I think it's really important that our students get to listen to our speakers, and we have this conversation in all our classes. There probably isn't a single thing we don't teach or go through our day that we can't talk about this really important topic. So yeah, I really look forward to showing the recording in my class, and and then lots of other classes. It's a really important topic. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.